Hi, everyone. For those of you just joining us, we have 3 minutes before we're going to get started, but we wanted to make sure we got our tech issues worked out so we can start right at 5 or 6 o'clock for some of you. Hi, how are you?
Hello.
All right, so we're on. I think Heather from Colorado said she's on as well.
Wonderful.
So we should be good to go. We can start right at 5. I gave a little announcement that we were just waiting a few minutes trying to work out our tech issues, and then we would be ready to start.
Wonderful.
So Gavin, I will go ahead and I figured I'd do the initial introduction and then start. We can introduce ourselves.
Great.
And then I'll start with the next part.
Perfect.
And I mean, Emmy said if we want to wait a couple minutes, we can go ahead and do that as well.
Yeah, we normally find that a little helpful, everybody logging in and trying to get things settled, but we can do some of the good intros so that everybody gets an idea of who we are. And if you wanted to kick it off.
Yeah, for sure. We have a couple more viewers, so that's good.
Yeah. Very excited to have everybody on.
Thank you for joining us in our inaugural live Facebook event. We're trying to find ways to really get some information out there and interact with people in an easier way or a faster way. So we hope that you guys will enjoy the information or find it useful, the information that we're going to present, and then also interact with us as we go. So I'm Amna Gilmore with Clarvida of Arizona. I'm the director of foster care and I'm a licensed therapist. Gavin, did you want to introduce yourself?
That'd be great. My name is Gavin Lello. I'm the Director of Operations in Colorado for Clarvida. I'm currently interim manager for our foster care program and oversee some other things as well. So very happy to be here and be introduced to everybody who's streaming with us.
So for today's format, we're really looking to talk about some things that you might face getting into foster care and talk about what supports are available. So we have identified 4 kind of common questions that we think might be helpful for people to talk about. For those of you who are viewing, if you want to put things in the chat and kind of help us, let us know your experiences if you're already in foster care. If you're not and you have questions, please put those in the chat as well. We really just want to start cultivating this group of people interested in foster care and already participating. So Gavin, I'll kick it off with kind of the first question. What brought you into foster care and what is your why? So, those of you who are viewing, if you're in foster care, if you could tell us what brought you into this. And then Gavin has some ideas of, what have brought other families we've worked with into this.
Yeah. Through, a long time of experience in being in and around child welfare, I myself have not been directly a foster parent, but working with foster parents, engaging with them on a daily basis over several years, you really start to learn and engage and understand a lot about where do those whys come from. And what we hear consistently are what look like different stories. Their whys come from different places. But as you really start to distill the information and dig into what's the core of it, we find so many similarities. We find people who really look at the thought of helping children and helping communities and families. So how do they see this passion for making sure that children, families, and communities can stay strong? And that's a big why behind where they find this drive. And what's so important about it is oftentimes this why is not like a match being lit in which it goes on fire and lights up immediately. It's often something that is cultivated over time. We know from research and looking at things from marketing and experience and then really diving into the foster care experience itself, that most people who come into foster care, who look at becoming a foster parent and move through that process, they had 7 or 8 different engagements of thinking about fostering before they ever took that first step. And so the lesson, the knowledge, the things that we take from this is the more touch points that we have in a community, the more connecting points we have to let people hear, see, kind of feel the thought of fostering, the more times people get to have that consideration. And so what starts as a little ember builds into that fire, that passion for wanting to do this. And it really does revolve around that concept of children, families, and community being kept together, and them as a foster parent being a key and vital part of helping make that happen in this safe, nurturing environment that pulls it together. I'm curious if anyone has been a foster parent, or what kind of drives them for their whys. If you want to put those in the comments, if you want to add to the communication, the things that we're saying related to this, because the why is that touch point that starts the whole decision, starts the ball rolling.
Oh, I saw a couple hearts go up, so I'm assuming that means that a couple people at least were or are foster parents. But if there are things, Gavin and I are pretty informal as it comes to this. So if you have, questions, thoughts, comments, please feel free to put them in the chat at any point in time.
Absolutely.
We can go to the next question,
Yeah.
or do you want to keep going?
I think that's great, because when we think about fostering and we think about the why of it, it's all kind of passion and desire and the positives of this movement towards it. But we all know, those of us in the system, that there can be challenges in being a foster parent. So one of the things that we've done is we've asked a lot of families, and Amna's done a lot of engagement around what are some of the challenges that foster families have overcome in their process to become a foster parent, or as they've been a foster parent. What did you learn, Amna?
So I think, to start off, one of the things to recognize is that this is not a super quick process, and it can feel very invasive, because we're asking a lot of questions about your life and your history and what your life is like now and your kids, and it can feel invasive, and people are going to be visiting you in your home pretty consistently, and not just us as your licensing staff, but the child welfare staff, the behavioral health staff who are going to be working with the kids in your home. And so that can feel very overwhelming. But families have, I think, as they have felt this reward of doing foster care once they've started, they have recognized that those things that they're going through really are worth it because of their why, right? So it comes back to that. I think another thing that families talk about is not wanting to get into this because they don't want to have a child come into their home and they're not sure if they can deal with that child then leaving. And so, I think that's a very valid point. And we really encourage families, after a placement has left, to then be able to take some time and process your grief and honor your grief over that child leaving, both for you and the other members of your home, because that is a very real thing. But what we also look at is going back to the why you talked about, Gavin, that often this feeling of being able to help families, children, and community helps people to understand that what they're going through and that grief that they're experiencing was, again, worth it, because they were able to provide a safe place for a child, or in the case of therapeutic foster care or developmental home, in order to provide kids and adults with a safe place to be a nurturing, loving family environment that honestly sometimes might end up, if we didn't have these homes, might end up in like a group home or an institution. So
Absolutely.
I think the other challenge is recognizing that if we have bio kids or we've been around kids before, some of those same techniques that we've used to raise our bio kids are not going to work the same with children who are in care, because they've experienced trauma and attachment issues. But with that being said, what I will say is that as an agency, and then throughout your individual states, there are supports and training who are going to help you learn how to deal with that. So things like, basic reward systems that we might use with our bio kids are not going to work the same. We're going to have to look at different ways to help children form relationships and feel like they can trust adults. And it can be hard not to take that personally when it feels like it's directed at you in a big outburst. But I think those are some of the challenges, again, going back to the why that we've heard from families about being able to overcome that and being able to help a child and their family as well in the end.
Yeah.
We did, Gavin, anything you would add to that?
I think the composite of those challenges and thinking about as a family, the hills and valleys that you will experience as a foster parent, and the challenges that come with any child, whether you're taking care of your nephew for a weekend or whether you have 2 or 3 children of your own and the difference between them. Foster children present just like that. They present as their own self, their own individual being, and our ability and our work to adapt to them as the parent, as the person who's supporting them in their growth and development is what's important. And I think the key things that I heard from a lot of families was the opportunity to get support from the agency, from, evidence-based practices that are taught and given to families to encourage and help their development as a parent, not just for foster children, but for their own children, for their relationships. We use TBRI, trust-based relational intervention, in a lot of our programs. We use motivational interviewing in a lot of our programs. And we have many other skill supports and things that really help families not just experience challenge, but experience challenge, overcome it, and make that into an opportunity for them.
Yeah. And I think one other thing I would add is within that support piece, when you have all these other entities that the child in your home is working with, or adults if you're doing developmental things, we as an agency are going to help you through that, right? And we're going to help understand the system, whether it's IEPs and 504 plans or whether it's developmental services for the member in your home. So know that is something that we as an agency are going to be there to support you through. We're not going to put you in there flying blind. Gavin, to go on to kind of our next question, that kind of leads us in as a good segue. We also asked our families what has been most rewarding for you since becoming a foster parent. Do you want to share some of your findings?
Yeah, I think the balance of families being able to think about both what's been challenging, hard, and how they've turned those into opportunities, as well as the ability to look at rewards of foster parenting that are really kind of innate in the system itself and intrinsic into what they get out of it. And what we heard were these stories about watching a child be able to feel safe in an environment, and just that feeling of being able to watch a child become safe, become comfortable, be able to express, explore, and show their personality and their growth and development was so powerfully rewarding. We also saw many families who not just saw that approach, that movement, that building of that child's personality growth and development, but they were able also to see the family unit's growth. And that is both the biological family's unit and their own family. So those rewards crossed this environment of all those people being touched, from the biological family, parents, and others who are involved in supporting the potential for reunification, the child, their engagement, growth, and development, and the family, the foster parent themselves, in being able to explore and understand so much about themselves as they learned more about what just is happening for this child and this family.
You know, Gavin,
The power of reunification. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Amna.
I was just
Jump in.
to piggyback on your part of working with the bio family as well. You know, I think I remember having a participant in training who said it wasn't until I really got into this that I recognized I wasn't just helping the child, it was a whole family thing.
Yeah.
In helping the learn how to, you know, what to do differently with their child, I was helping the whole family, which generationally, hopefully that would break some cycles.
Absolutely. That's such a powerful statement for whoever provided that and brought that in, because, you know, foster parenting is a very personal thing, but so many of the stories, particularly around why they found it rewarding. I've worked with foster families who've done this 10, 15, 20, 30 plus years, and their reward is so similar in that they get to see the growth of a child and a family. They get to see communities change in what they're doing and where they're going, and it's so impactful, so important to them. The the developmental milestones, the movement of these systemic things are so rewarding for families that that's what keeps them going, even through sometimes that challenge that we talked about of seeing a child who you've poured so much into return home. And it is painful. We acknowledge it, we know it, and we support it as an agency of how to help move through that, because the next child is going to give you this reward again. And that reward certainly outweighs that challenge, because that challenge and opportunity of kind of letting a child go is also letting a child go back into such a good environment for them.
And if I can add, you know, research wise, what we know really is that ultimately it is best if the parents are able to be safe, or the primary caregivers, whoever they are. Children do so much better, not even so much better, but they want to be with family, right?
Yep.
Ultimately, with family, they just want the abuse or neglect or whatever was happening to stop. And so if we can find a way for the whole family to be safer, to be able to keep the child with family, that's going to be better for them in the end, even though we've given them an amazing life and all of these things in our home. It is also important to recognize that that's a big part of people wanting to be with the people that they know, right? That's their family. That's where they came from.
Yeah, that's so important to be able to note, because, and we can talk, and you know, we all kind of in the field, you know, we look at the research because it's important, but the meaning of the research is really where it lends to helping us, that the outcomes for children who are left or be able to be returned into a biological unit do tend to be better. And there's that kind of age-old saying of it takes a village. And what our foster system and foster parents do is they get to be that step, that support in that village for that family to continue to grow on. And that's what is so important.
Agreeing.
Yeah. So we did have kind of a fourth and final question that we engaged with families on that we wanted to know about. Because what we know from doing this a long time, when I talked that, 10, 15, 20 plus years, I've been doing it that long or longer, if you can't tell potentially by the color of the beard, that when families stick around, when they learn this system, when they understand what's happening, they also start to understand how other families might look at the system coming in. And so what we asked them was, what would you want somebody who's thinking about fostering to know? What would be important? What would be that information to impart to them if they're thinking about fostering now? They're in that 1, 2, 3, or 7th or 8th time of thinking about it. What do they need to know? What did you learn about that, Amna?
So I think, well, not I think, I know. One of the of this is that they want families, they want people to know that about this piece of working with bio parents, right? Because I think for new families coming in pre-service training, that can be kind of scary or daunting, or our perceptions of what got kids into care can be really exaggerated, because that's what we see in the media, right? Or that's what we hear in society. We hear these sensationalized stories about kids being removed. And so I think sometimes new families coming in are worried about what will that be like working with a bio family or a primary family. And I want to just give a little bit of information on what we call shared parenting, right? So it is working with the primary family, whether, they're going to be likely doing visits, because ultimately the goal is for children to go home and reunify with their family. They're going to be doing visits, but little things that we can do really help to build that relationship. And really only in very few and far between cases is there an issue where there's a lot of conflict with the bio parent and the foster parent. It is really often, much more often, it is a good working relationship. And that can be achieved just by little things like setting up, if you're not comfortable with giving them your private email, setting up another email that is specifically for bio parents to email things. You can then share pictures with them with child welfare approval, but you can share pictures, you can share updates on what they're doing at visits. You can give them, you can send the kids artwork from school. Even with, let's say you have an infant in your home, when you go to the doctor's appointment, if the bio parent wasn't able to go, then you call the bio parent and say, hey, the doctor said it's time to start doing solids. Should we start with peas or green beans? What do you think, right? That just gives parents this feeling of really being in it at the time. So, are involved. So I think that's a really big piece of this, is helping parents to know that. The other thing I would say is getting to know that while the kids have challenges, they're going to be supported through this, right? So know that we're here for you. Ask all the questions you have. Continue to work with your licensing worker, your foster care specialist, whatever they're called in your state and at your agency, right? It can be very different, but we're going to be there for you and help you through all of these things. And the rewards really ultimately, I think, outweigh all of those system struggles, all the sadness, all the grief and loss. Like, really going back to shared parenting, we have many families who still consistently have interaction with kids that were in their placement before, because they have that relationship, they have built that relationship with family. If it's appropriate, they could have situations where the kids still come back and maybe visit on a weekend, or they come to birthday parties and things like that. So there are the, yes.
I think you even touched on, so we had a kind of a question from the audience. Thank you, Sean. Asking about, what's kind of this myth of what people think they need to have, or think they need to know or be able to do to be a foster parent, but it really isn't there. And you touched on some of it just talking about that piece of you don't have to do all this on your own. You don't have to be separate, that you can move through these things. And I think to add to that, a lot of families starting in fostering or maybe thinking about it, they think, well, I've got to be this very kind of big, effusive, love them all to death kind of personality. And that's not the case. Every personality fits. The caring for, the showing of consistency and affection and commitment to helping a child, that is a piece that's so big related to the engagement with children and their families. And so this potential myth or feeling that, one, bio families are going to be really hard to deal with is usually not true. And then two, that I have to be this kind of over exaggerated like parent and just perfect in every way. No, you just need to be that consistent presence for both that child and that family to be able to continue to move forward.
So Gavin, there's another question that came right after that too. Like, what advice would we give to foster parents who are feeling overwhelmed or unsure about how to best support their foster children? And what I would say, and then tell me what you think, really is talking to your agency. For me, I'm the director of foster care, but I'm also a therapist and a clinician. And so my role often is looking at it from a clinical standpoint. What is happening for the child? What are they needing in this moment? And there is absolutely a team approach to this. Like, I can advise my clinical piece, foster parents share what are they observing, what's working, what isn't. And along the same lines with their parents, what should that role be maybe with the parents as well? So my advice would really be to, first of all, share with your agency staff that you're feeling overwhelmed, because that's a very common feeling and we want to know about it. We want to know what we can do to help you, whether it is to get some additional like family support in there to help you through those pieces, or whether it's just to help normalize for you that, yeah, this is really tough and we get that. This is not your fault, or there's no blame on you that the child is really struggling, and we're struggling to figure out what to do.
Yeah, and thank you to Micah Lynn for jumping in and really reinforcing that as well, talking about dig into and utilize those services that are available, not just to the child, but to yourself and those people who are committed to you and your family's success.
Yep, absolutely. I wanted to say too, really in getting into foster care, I think it's important for families to just know too that even though you might get the child in your home at a really young age, right, they still have things that they've gone through. And so they might still have challenges. And that, again, is no reflection on your parenting. There are genetic pieces to this. There are, intrauterine things that may have happened. So again, it's really important to continue going to your supports who have been dealing with this and are dealing with this day in and day out, and really use their advice and their support through this to connect you with other services, or give you, like I said, just support and say, we get this is tough and you're doing a great job.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I sometimes have a little bit of a soapbox about, if anybody is old enough to understand the idea of soapbox and stepping on your soapbox and kind of giving that speech, children who come into the foster care system and are involved in the families, they're still just children. They're still just doing the same thing that any child would. So as your own children or children you've seen or relatives or kids you've just known, they move through developmental stages differently. They have their own needs, desires, pluses and minuses, and that's no different than foster children. The difference being is that foster children do come with potentially a little bit more of a history of some things that are unsettled, some trauma, some disengagement, some pieces that make some of those very average life movement steps a little more challenging, but they are still well within that developmental array, within that spectrum of normal behaviors. And what we want to make sure we do is that we continue to normalize those behaviors in terms of where they're at developmentally and moving. And so foster parents are so incredibly important in helping children see that where they're maybe struggling is just part of normal growth, and helping the system and everyone else recognize that that is part of it as well.
And I think, Gavin, to piggyback on that, when we look at development for kids who have been through, like TBRI calls it, kids from hard places, right? So when we look at their trajectory, on average, kids are going to be delayed a little bit in their emotional maturity and their emotional responsiveness because of the trauma they've experienced, or because of the attachment issues that they experienced that brought them into care. And so I think it's really important to recognize, when you talk about like looking at what's development for them, the more we can kind of adjust our expectations and recognize, I know they're 10, but when they get triggered, they might be 4. And so I'm just going to look at them and treat them like they're 4 when they're triggered. And then we'll go back to treating them like 10 when they're regulated and doing a little better. So it is really helpful to kind of shift those expectations a bit. And again, we're going to guide you through that piece of it. Like, what should I be looking at? Where do they, how do we assess them? What do they need through this?
Yeah. Any more comments? I think I appreciate your comment, Donnie, kind of talking your history of where you got to where you're at now, and thank you for doing that. It is something that often is kind of a lifelong piece when it comes to doing this type of work. Important for us is also continuing to spread that word of the fact that there is need, that there still is ongoing, even with so much abundance in our systems and so many things that are available, that there's always still need for people who want to engage. And foster parents are a core part of that need. And so being able to take things like what we've done today, and hopefully we expand from that in the oncoming months and do more of these and outreaches. But, the old like, follow, and subscribe. Tell us what's working. Tell us what you liked about these things, and let others know. Let's make what is 10 or 15 people today 100 the next time, and 100 the next time, because that cascading of pyramiding people on top and spreading the word gets our 7 or 8 times to that one person who hasn't heard it yet happen that much faster. And that's what's so incredibly important when we look at making sure the need and the presence of the child welfare system is made real to everybody who's out there. Because even somebody who doesn't want or isn't in a position to be a foster parent can still spread the word.
And I think, to piggyback on that too, if you have questions about it, let's say this is your 4th time you've asked, or the 1st time, please reach out and let's talk through with our actual staff what this might look like. Because it doesn't have to start out that you have 4 kids in your home by the time you're done licensing, right? You could start, depending on your state, you could start with respite only. And what respite is providing care for kids while the ongoing placement is taking a break. So maybe you have a couple kids in your home for a weekend, and that's how you start out in foster care. So it doesn't mean that you have to start with a full house the day you get licensed. So please know that there are options of ways to kind of work in and around foster care first before you have to become a foster parent and have a ton of kids. It's not a ton, but have even 3 or 4 placements in your home in the beginning. So please reach out and let us answer any questions you have. If there are other topics that you would like to know more about, Gavin and I or other agencies throughout the U.S., we're finding people to present so we can bring that information to you on a consistent basis. Anything else you would add, Gavin, before we kind of close it for today?
No, I just really appreciate this kind of our inaugural run, our push to try and be engaging in both our Clarvida community, but the community at large. And so spreading the word, telling us what do you want to hear about. If we were to do this again a month from now, what's an important topic, child welfare, foster parenting, foster care, that you want us to research and provide to you? We really want to know. That'd be kind of my ending message.
Absolutely. So thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate it. If we missed some of your comments, I think we got them all, but please feel free to send messages afterward. We would love to interact with you, but thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate it. We hope you have a great rest of your night.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.